Hi everyone, I'd like to run through some of the basics and a few of the extra things to do with this interview project. You've done your interview, you've shot some B-roll, and here's a quick example. And your first step is to really go through this interview and figure out what is usable. Do not just take the whole thing and drag and drop it in. Your job as an editor is to figure out what's good and what's not so good. So after really listening to this and selecting some in and out points, I'm going to start dragging clips down. Now, one thing you can do as you are listening is you can listen, and where you see something interesting, just hit the M key. That makes a little marker so that you can go back and you can make those edits and select in and out points. So let's do that. We'll get right to that first marker, which is right there, just about. Select an in point, select an out point that I want to use for that clip, and drag it into my sequence. And I'm going to do it again just so we have two separate pieces to work with. Remember, you're doing this because you're really listening to it, okay? It's not a random thing at all. Let's hit the backslash key so we can get this together again. So I now have two clips, and I am going to play this again and really listen close. And I might decide that actually I don't need this piece, and I might listen more and discover that, gee, right here, this would be a great break, and I could put this piece instead in here. So what I can do is split this with the razor tool, click right on the line, and now I've broken this into a couple different clips. Okay, so now I've changed the order of my edit. And that is called non-linear editing. That's what we're able to do here. You can do that as many times as you want. Just be cautious when you're doing it. I do not use that tool if I'm trimming the ends of clips. I use this tool because I may decide to go back and expand or decrease this. And if I have split it with the razor tool and just lopped something off and deleted it, then it's hard to recover that. There's nothing left to recover after that. Okay, so use the razor tool to split things in the middle. Use the trim tool to split things after. So I've done that. I've shot a lot of good B-roll. Remember, if you're doing a minute-long interview project, you probably need to do a 10-minute interview just so you have enough to work with. You don't just want to take what you have and pop it in. You really want to work with stuff and make some really critical decisions. Same with B-roll. Just because you need 45 seconds does not mean you shoot 45 seconds. You shoot quite a bit so you get really good stuff. So let's play with this piece of B-roll. I'm going to use this clip, and let's say I really just need a little bit. So let's just check it out. That's a little shaky, but I'm going to use it anyway for this demonstration. And there's my in and out point. And I could just take video. I could also just take audio, but I'm going to take the whole thing. And you'll see when I decide where to put it, I'll decide based on what my subject is saying here. Perhaps I'm going to put it right there. Let's take a look. Now I can see by audio track 1 being open that I have pretty good, strong audio. It is very helpful for me as an editor to be able to open my video track so that I can see what clip is there, as well as my audio track, just so I'm aware of what's there. Now, if I'm working with B-roll, I might keep this closed, but if I'm putting in music down here, I definitely want that track open. I can, of course, increase the depth of these tracks if it's helpful during editing, and sometimes I'll even increase the depth of these video tracks just to give me more room to work with. Okay, so that's the process. We're going to keep doing that and setting in and out points. I'm going to do this a little randomly for the sake of speed, popping them in, and I might use very direct cuts so that perhaps it goes right from him to this guy to these folks and then back to him. Okay? I can certainly use other transitions. I can cross dissolve on here. I can fade off here. I could cross dissolve between the two. But I just want to be somewhat consistent and have a reason for doing these. Depending on my interviews, I tend to cut off the subject, use cuts, these direct splits between interviews, and sometimes I fade back onto the subject, but it all depends on the pace and everything else. All right? So let's say I've taken care of all my B-roll. Once I've done all that, it's time to really take a critical look at things. And one thing I'm noticing is that in this clip seems to look different from this clip. And I think it is the white balance is a little off on this clip. So one quick effect I can use is called the fast color corrector. I just type FAS. If my clip is selected, I double click and it's instantly applied. I manipulate that by effect controls right here. And the way I do it is I find something I want to be white, and in this case it is this piece of paper right back here. Now if I click this, or I'm sorry, if I control click this little eyedropper, it'll turn bigger. This eyedropper will select 1 pixel when I click over here. If I want a bigger range, I'll click this and it'll select 5. For the purposes of this, I'm just going to pick 1. So you click the eyedropper, you come up here, get to pure white, and you'll see right away there's a subtle difference. If I want to see that subtle difference, I can toggle the effect on or off. This is off, and that's on. And I can see that his skin tone is a little more balanced. I can manipulate this either with this dial. I can shift it all the way from a cooler, almost green, to craziness. And if I lose where I am, I just hit Control Z and I get back to where I started. That's the fast color corrector. The other thing I can do, if something is too white, I can pull this back a little and you can see a little more detail. If blacks are too deep, I can pull this back and you'll see her black jacket is kind of starting to wash out a bit. Okay? So those are just a few things. I can do similar things with input levels, determine how black something is, and I can increase the whiteness here. Go too far, you wash it out. So you do this stuff very precisely, okay? Very precisely. It is not work that you do like really quick and move on. So that is one effect I can use, the fast color corrector. Personally, I use this 90% of the time just to re-white balance something, and it works great. Let's go ahead and cut this. Let me show you another effect. If my shot is a little dark and I just need to pop the brightness a tiny bit, I can add brightness and contrast. And the effect might come in like this. To manipulate it, you open it. So if I say open your effect, it means click this little arrow. I can adjust brightness, very dark, very bright, brighter I mean. I can adjust contrast. You want something like really black, nice black but not crazy black. And you want something white, but same thing, not crazy white. So something like this. Definitely not like this, sorry about that. I'm going to get out of this one. And I'm hitting Control Z 3 times to get back to where I was. And I'm actually going to pop this back to, so let's say I like this. I think this is good, but I can't remember what the original clip looked like. I just toggle it off, back on, off, on, and gee, I actually like this a little better. Okay, so that is brightness. There is one more that I'll teach you right away, and it's called shadow and highlight. Shadow and highlight works so-so. I think sometimes it makes footage look really squirrely, kind of messy. But let's take a look. I popped it on. Before I mess with it, I'm going to take brightness and contrast off for the sake of doing this. I popped it on. It already jumped things way up. And this is off. This is on. I absolutely don't like it with the auto on. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pull the shadows back a little bit, back into a little bit more tone. It's probably calling shadows these things. It might be calling all of her a shadow, frankly. It does not have, super sensitivity. And maybe I want to pop my highlights back, pull it up. You can see this wall becomes sort of a weird mustardy color Let's say I want to pull them back a little bit, and that is now 0. So this effect's not doing a lot of helpful things for me. But you know what? It all depends on the clip. If you have a clip where you have some deep shadows, especially shadows and faces, adding shadow highlight might be one of the first things you do. Sometimes you add multiple effects on, and as you add them, they can get messier and messier. So sometimes it's helpful just to go back to one of your earlier effects, right-click it, and clear it off. If I am working with a lot of effects, and I usually work with quite a few, and I just get overwhelmed by what exactly I have on, I will just clear the whole deck and start over. So don't feel like you're wasting time if you're doing that. Sometimes you have to see this picture clearly again. If you click something, let's say you have the source monitor up and you want to put shadow and highlight on, and you click and you're like, well, I don't know if that's it, or you can't find it and you click it again or again, it'll just keep adding it. And unfortunately, just because you add it once doesn't mean it's good. Sometimes you can toggle it off and it's fine to get rid of it. I think it's more helpful to actually clear it so that you know this slate is clean. As you work and you do more effects and more types of things, it's really important to save. So make sure you're steadily saving. There's nothing more frustrating in a course like this than to discover you are totally starting over from scratch. So those are a few of the basics. Of course, you have transitions. I'm sorry, not audio transitions. You have video transitions to use, and they won't show up if you already have something in the search bar. So just clear that, and then you'll see your other things. Remember, we use mostly dissolves, and the cross dissolve is probably the default. You can pop it up here. If that dissolve becomes too long, you can go ahead and trim that. Okay? So play around with these, get really comfortable with this stuff, and start making sure you're consistent with white balancing throughout. If you've worked in multiple locations or you came back and shot B-roll another day, just get your white balance totally to the point where you can look at one clip and say, yes, it's shot in exactly the same room as the other. This one to this one, I can do that. This one to this one, not so much. Okay? Thanks.